Thanks for joining us. My name is Ibrahim Sani. I am currently at the very nice place of Tan Sri Jemilah's property right now at the... I wouldn't have expected to be in this hush area so close to town. That's the crazy part. But thank you very much, Tan Sri, for welcoming me to your home. One of the reasons why I wanted to have a conversation with you is because of your recent op-ed that you jointly wrote with the Minister of NRES, Muhammad Nik Nazmi. One of the areas was on the point of you highlighting the, I guess, disappointment of COP29 and perhaps some of the learnings that we can take from it. Maybe you can walk through with us regarding that particular idea.
Sure. I think, first of all, welcome to our home. I think, first of all, that COP28 in Dubai announced that, the importance of climate change and the impact on people, and COP29 in Baku was advertised as the finance COP. Right? So people were looking forward to this. There were many. There was a belief among many actors, state and non-state actors, that this would be the year that states would mobilize financial commitments ahead of COP30 in Belém, which is the biodiversity COP. Now, throughout the subsidiary body meetings that happens before the COP and the COP itself, many countries failed to show their cards. People were holding back, and what were they willing to commit? We weren't clear. It's not just at COP itself, but the lead up to the COP. Now, by the time they eventually did, which is too late and then too little, leaving just a few days to bridge the negotiations, it left a gap of trillions of dollars. We had agreed to 1.3 trillion, but we walked away with a figure of 730 million, which
it's
is
meager,
not enough.
actually.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why the countries held back were more of developing nations were looking at how the developed nations are posturing. Developed nations are trying to figure out how they can walk away from this as little with financial obligations as possible.
Yeah.
Why were you so optimistic about COP29? I mean, I'm very pessimistic.
No, I wasn't optimistic about COP29, but I feel that the COPs need to be held accountable.
Yeah.
When you say that there is a global need for finance, when we know that the developing world and the underdeveloped countries are the ones who are actually feeling the brunt of climate change, not caused by them. Yeah, the low emitters are carrying the brunt. And therefore, what other way do we move forward except for a multilateral process, right? I think that's critical to understand.
Of course, before we go into that, Tan Sri, I just want to highlight that in your op-ed you were talking about balancing equitable economic growth with meaningful climate change action.
Absolutely.
So maybe in that context you can share with us what's next or what you think is best.
We, Malaysia included, we are still, a high middle income country, but we're still developing, right? And many countries who are less developed than us will rely on industries that are carbon intensive, such as manufacturing, energy, agriculture. But equitable economic growth and climate action needs to go hand in hand. It's about one doesn't have to hinder the other. I mean, that's the ideal state, right? So green technologies, sustainable practices can drive innovation and job creation, particularly in the developing world. And I think that this is where we must talk about a safe and just transition. We can't just say, well, for the developing world, we have to do this. And this is what's happening now, right? The developed world is kind of holding the developing world to hostage, saying, oh, you need to contribute as well when they weren't involved. So I think the shift to green economy must be inclusive and fair, right? So I think I come back to how Baku was meant to be a finance COP, and the financing is imperative to that just transition. And wealthier nations must provide funds to assist those, and also assist not just financially, but also assist in terms of transfer of clean technologies, capacity building, and so forth. But the COP highlighted the need for, but regrettably, the absence of collective action and global solidarity. So striking that balance of what I call equitable growth and climate action cannot be done individually. It requires political will. It requires collaboration across government, civil society, and also private sector.
Now that we know that the loss and damage fund has been settled at 730 million US dollars, which is a drop in the ocean, so to speak, what are the costs involved knowing that the loss and damage fund is just as little as that? Can these growth or climate change action can be done properly then? I mean, what is your expectations on this?
Well, I mean, it is what it is, right? We can't get more than that. I think that, while the loss and damage fund was intended to operationalize and that equitable response that I mentioned, I think what we have to do now is to look at, how do countries balance that loss and damage that is economic and non-economic. It's not just about economics, right? Sometimes it can be rapid decimation due to climate change. We're talking about Pacific Islanders and so forth, but also slower long-term impacts, right? And particularly when I think about health, right? The slower long-term impact in health.
Yes.
So health is a great way to explain, the insufficiencies with 730 million. To give you an example, to run one single hospital in the United States, it will cost about 210 million annually. So basically, the loss and damage fund is running 4 hospitals in US as opposed to trying to find solutions for the world.
What was it again? The initial idea, 1.3 trillion? Initially,
but we got 730 million.
Yeah.
And just to say that will actually be the operational cost of less than 4 hospitals in the United States. So how do you expect to solve this? Now, I think, unfortunately, as the developing world feels abandoned, it has to find other ways. But the developed world has to face the consequences when there is massive migration due to climate change, when people will be suffering around the world. And to give you another crazy figure, in 2023, the spend on military in the US was 2.4. Global spend on military was 2.4 trillion in 2023.
I suspect it's going to be more now because of the Ukraine war and such.
So basically, humans have spent that money to defend themselves against themselves, when the cost to defend ourselves and the whole humanity is much less than that.
Sorry, you couldn't have said that better, actually.
Yeah.
Let's bring it closer to home.
Yep.
We're looking at some of the initiatives that is being done by the government as well as private players. Corporates in Malaysia are moving faster than I thought before. Maybe you can walk through with us some of the national plans, including the 2 things that I want to touch, the National Climate Change Policy, as well as the National Adaptation Plan, to be honest.
Okay. So I think, YB Nick Nazmi has done a really sterling job in trying to move the National Climate Change policy. I like the way that he's doing it, really consultative, getting people's inputs. Economically, in the finance cost, Malaysia needs about 350 billion in investments to achieve net zero, right? An estimated 392 billion over the next 50 years to adapt and mitigate climate change impacts. Now, in 2021 alone, the government, our country, experienced a loss of about 6.1 billion just due to floods. Now, that's 2021. You have seen, over the last 2 years, the impact of flooding and heat has really increased. So I expect the number to be very much higher. So I think that innovative ways of financing our loss and damage is going to be quite critical. The National Climate Change Policy aims to address this by stimulating domestic green financing through market options and market enablers. The implementation of the carbon pricing instruments, I think, is going to be important. So if we can put a price tag on the effects of greenhouse gas emissions, then those who are high emitters can either shift their activities or continue emitting and pay to address the consequences that they create. So I think this whole issue about responsibility and that policy, the policy that's being developed, aims to advance domestic green financing by fusing climate change into fiscal planning macroeconomic policies. We need to look at investment management, procurement practices. So I think working with the private sector is going to be crucial to and integral to implementing these strategies.
Also, I want to see where our plans fit when it comes to international guidelines. We have the Planetary Health Roadmap.
Yeah.
We all for the global
Yeah.
adopters, and of course locally we have the National Planetary Health Action Plan.
That's right.
So how do you see the Planetary Health Roadmap jive or synergize with the
Yeah.
National Planetary Health Action
Yeah.
Plan?
Before I go to that, if I may just mention a little bit about the National Adaptation Plan.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I think this is going to be vital. I think while we recognize mitigation is key, adaptation must also walk in hand in hand with this, right?
Yes.
And I think that what we need to do is really start from the communities, start at grassroots levels, from communities where the worst effect of climate change happens, right? And what we need to do is strengthen our resilience, and the NAP, the National Adaptation Plan, offers some crucial support to this, and the National Planetary Health Action Plan brings it together, because this is about what systemic shifts need to happen. We know that, unfortunately, not just in Malaysia, in every country, I think, there's a lot of siloing, right? The people are working in silos. We have Sustainable Development Goals as our ultimate game plan in 2030. We know that Malaysia is better off than most countries, but generally the world is doing very poorly on. So having this systems framework of the National Planetary Health Action Plan helps to drive the attainment of SDGs through this multi-system approach, right? Now, you asked me about, how do these things, I think the roadmap that you mentioned, the Planetary Health Roadmap that we produced during the last summit last year, was developed by more than several hundred people from around the world, identifying what are the key things that must shift. And of course, it identified governance is key, because you've got to have political will is one thing, but systems in government, right? They will look at, if you look at food production, how does that impact climate change? How does that impact health in people? How does climate change impact health and food production and soil quality? What kind of financing is needed to make sure that you have a loop, a circle that's connecting all of this? Same with if you look at energy, or you look at water resources and so forth. So I think the roadmap identifies a couple of crucial areas. One, governance is one. Number two is how do we communicate? Because part of the problem, if you and I go out to some pasar malam tomorrow and tell someone, what do you think about climate change? And
it wouldn't resonate.
Right? It won't. What do you think about 1.5?
Yeah.
Right? But if you say to a fisherman in Terengganu, Pakcik, how is your catch?
Yeah.
How do you feel going up? He'll probably tell you he's getting more sick because of heat exposure.
Yeah.
He's probably getting more infectious diseases. He's probably seeing a quality of catch that is below what it was before. He's probably telling you he's seeing a lot of plastic. So I think that we need to be able to get every citizen in Malaysia, and indeed the world, to understand that this is not the government's problem, it's everyone's problem. If we don't protect the planet, we will get climate change, we will get pollution, we will get microplastics, all these issues, and it comes to affect us, our health, our economy, our well-being. So I think, getting that transformative kind of approach to that, right? The third area I would say will be education. How do we make sure that as we educate our children and young adults, we get them to understand that their decisions that they make as an adult will have impact on the planet and their health, their economy, and so forth. I work at Sunway University. We are the only university in the world right now where planetary health and sustainability are mandatory subjects. You can't graduate without completing 7 weeks courses. So how do you now transform that? And I think our national national higher education blueprint is looking into this. Our 13th Malaysia plan is another opportunity. And then, of course, the role of private sector. I think it's very, very important to bring the private sector on board, not alienate them, right? Help them to understand that it's good business to protect the planet, it's good business to avoid climate change, it's good business to protect people's health. So how do you make this, understanding much more clear, so that when you and I make a decision, are we going to buy that next piece of clothing, you think about where that may land 10 years from now.
But isn't generational awareness getting better? I'm having a reality check. My eldest is now 18 this year. That's a big alarm bell for me, at least. I'm not that young anymore. But the way she looks at things, completely different from how I would when I was 18. You know.
I would say yes and no. I think that you and I live in urban settings. I think that majority of our children are internet savvy. They're in a very privileged position that they can talk about climate change. Right? So I think we have to be realistic. I don't know. I don't have the real data, but there's a very good study done on the perception of climate change by our friends at Monash University, and shows that people actually know, but they just don't know what to do. Right? So that's where the communication comes in. Yes, this is important. Don't overwhelm people with the doom and gloom, but give stories of hope and possibility. And this is where your daughter and my children and other young people will find solutions. Look at how, you know, some young students are already able to look at how they dissolve plastic in days rather than years. Right? So technology, honestly, Ibrahim, we have all the knowledge, all the technology available at our fingertips today. Is whether we want to use it or not, which means changing our business model, creating policies that will help facilitate these changes, and our mindset, our behaviors.
You've been in the intersection of national health systems with now climate solutioning. Where do you see the I guess roadblock that needs to be removed other than communication? Do you feel that is it trying to increase public awareness so that they can pressure their political representatives and create the political will, or is there somewhere else that lies?
The biggest challenge we have is governance, right? Without a doubt. We need to have, as I mentioned before, a multi-system connected way of addressing the complexity that we're in. We are living in very uncertain times. We are first facing what the UN has described, an uncertainty complex. We have the dangerous planetary changes of the Anthropocene created by us. We have, you know, sweeping societal transformations, and we have polarization on top of everyday uncertainties. But on top of that, we have a growth model that is based on GDP. Okay, so it comes back to the fact that does having a high GDP actually lead to happier citizens?
Of course not. There is no economists would.
So I
would
think
say
that we need to kind of press the reset button a little bit, rethink how we want to live, how we want to leave a legacy for our future generations. You know, when I look at the Madani concept, it is very much in line with planetary health. It's about solidarity, equity, you know, protection of the environment, making sure that, you know, there's social distribution, all these things which are really important. But how do we rewire our brains to say that actually it makes good sense financially, you know, health-wise, socially, environmentally, to do the right things? It's not about short-term gains. It's about playing that long game, right? So you're talking about patient economics. You're talking about, you know, really looking at intergenerational approaches to how we develop as a nation. So how do we get there? Political will, leadership. You know, I'm hoping our Prime Minister watches this and realizes that he has a tremendous opportunity, particularly now under ASEAN chairmanship, to at least make a difference in the region. You and I have both gone through the pandemic. We've seen what that has happened to our economy, our people,
and the
the
next
lives
pandemic
that
is
are
just
lost.
around the corner.
The next pandemic is not going to be 100 years. We are already seeing, you know, what's happening now in China with the, you know, with the new metavirus, the avian type flu, and that's been predicted for some time. People like me have been, you know, engaged with our own networks to say, how do we prepare for disease X? How do we prepare for, you know, what might be the next avian kind of pandemic, right? And we can't go on doing the same thing expecting to have a different outcome. We can't. So, you know, can we take some of these major steps and put in place policies that are pro-planet, pro-people, that will be difficult, but to take that hard decision that we must transition away from fossil fuels. We must find a way to have our economies develop in a different way. We need to, use human capital intelligence, use the technology we have, and build a better future for everyone.
I guess now I want to ask you, what are your expectations for COP30? And also, what are your, I guess, maybe not concerns, but skepticism in terms of achieving these kind of outcomes from COP30, the upcoming?
Before I go to COP30, let's look at ASEAN again, right? The carbon pricing issue. Through multilateral efforts, this is a great thing, right?
It's an awesome thing. Yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean, if every region has that mindset, right, then you can go to COP saying that, hang on a minute, at least Article 6, we have addressed Article 6, right? But COP30, well, number one, you've got a strong president, President Lula, who understands the importance of biodiversity, protection of the climate, and so forth, who is actively trying to reforest Brazil. I think the anger from COP29 is still palpable. I think that he knows, as the president of Brazil and the host of COP30, that there will be greater expectations. I know that they are looking at the linkages also. It's not just climate change, it's also biodiversity loss and pollution and other things, right? But a multilateral process is a multilateral process. I think that sometimes it takes a terribly long time. By the way, did you know it was 11 years of negotiations before the first COP? So COP.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah. So you think
as in
that
COP 1?
Yeah. Before COP 1, there's 11 years pre-COP to get to COP 1, right? So when we go to COP 30, basically it's 41 years, and we haven't been able to, well, we have in some ways moved some things. The Paris Agreement was a very big achievement. The fact that recognition that health is an integral part of climate change impacts, I think that's a great achievement as well. So I think ultimately, Ibrahim, I'm a firm believer that at national level, we just have to move on. And then the global south must be much more collaborative, much more strategic in getting their voices heard. So I really hope at COP30, they don't leave the negotiations to the end. People have bought their air tickets. We're going to go to Belém, which is so far away, right? Not many of us will be able to go because it's so expensive.
Are you going?
I'm not sure because, I'm also, wary of the costs, right? But the thing is that, I think it's really important for the Global South in the lead up to the COP. And this is what I'm talking about, the Bonn meeting, the pre-COP meetings. The Global South has to come together. Because half the time when the negotiations are delayed, people have air tickets that they have to fly back. They can't stay on. Let's get our act together. It has to start with us. People in the developing world, the middle income countries, we've got to get our act together. We have to have common messages. We have to be strong and use that multilateral platform, to achieve what we want.
You are echoing some of the guests that have appeared on this show. Dr. K.S. Jomo, Tan Sri Andrew Sheng, and now you are talking about how the Global South must galvanize and, I guess, move together as one. In fact, I believe Tan Sri Andrew Sheng mentioned something along the lines of, we just cannot wait for anybody else.
No, we definitely cannot wait for the developed world.
No.
Right? There is no accountability.
So you echo that kind of...
Yes, of course. And I think that when we move, we can move. And, look at the emerging economies. I mean, ASEAN is going to be a powerful economy. China is already a powerful economy. India, Korea. I don't think we have to wait for the West. I think we need to move forward. So I really hope that the leaders from the Global South, collectively have that ambition, and not to be demoralized. I don't believe in that. You have, the minute you feel that it's hopeless, you have no hope. But the minute you come together and say, hang on a minute, here's what we are going to demand. It's not to say that we're going to... we're not going to advocate. No, we are going to demand this. We demand this. I mean, Asia is basically the supply chain warehouse of the rest of the world. Why aren't we exerting our power there, right?
Final comments, Tan Sri?
My hope is that the viewers, will take an interest in understanding how healthy people can only happen with a healthy planet.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a healthy planet, you will get severe changes, in our climate patterns. We will have, a lot of problems with pollution, microplastics, environmental degradation, disasters, and so forth. And the other thing, of course, is that this is intergenerational. It's our responsibility to future generations, right? How do we want to be remembered? We are the ancestors that have created this path.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. That was Tan Sri Jemilah Mahmood, Sunway University, Planetary.
Sunway Center for Planetary Health.
There you go. And you want to read that op-ed, head off to The Edge Weekly and find out more information on Astra AWANI as well as on The Edge. Until then, thanks very much for watching. Catch you in the next one.